That diagnosis had been sitting in my purse for exactly 3 years. I never expected it would come in handy today of all days. When the doorbell rang, I was out on the balcony pruning my rose bushes. Outside, it was a typical June afternoon in Chicago, stuffy, muggy, the kind of heavy heat that made it hard to draw a deep breath. The steady, monotonous buzzing of insects seemed to announce that something extraordinary was about to happen. I opened the door and saw her. The woman was wearing a loose, floral maternity dress. Her belly was so large it looked like a balloon ready to pop at any second. Her face was very young, though there were dark, bluish circles under her eyes. Her lips trembled slightly, but she was trying with all her might to pull the corners of her mouth up into a provocative smile. "I'm pregnant with your husband," she said. "Be smart and just give him a divorce." I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. Her gaze darted to the side for a second, as if she hadn't expected me to remain so calm. In reality, my heart was pounding like crazy, and the blood rushed to my head. But my hand had already slipped into my purse on the entryway console, feeling for that thin sheet of paper. A piece of paper that was like a long sharpened knife. 3 years ago, in the fall, when I married Carter, everyone said I had caught lightning in a bottle. He was a well-known architect in the city, cultured, articulate, with his own thriving firm. I, on the other hand, was just an ordinary high school English literature teacher. My parents ran a small, family-owned diner in Geneva, out in the suburbs. Standing next to him, I looked like a girl from a completely different world. But love doesn't look at birth certificates or bank statements. We met at a house party thrown by mutual friends in Wicker Park. He was late. He was wearing a charcoal trench coat, and when he walked in, he brought a gust of cool autumn wind into the hallway that lifted the corner of the napkin resting on the table in front of me. "Sorry, traffic on Lake Shore Drive," he had said, and his voice was calm and warm, like a mug of hot coffee on a winter evening. He later admitted that the only thing he remembered from that night was my smile. We dated for over a year, and then, as a natural next step, we got married. The wedding wasn't huge. We only invited our closest family and friends. I stood beside him in my white dress, smiling from ear to ear. My mom cried tears of joy, and my dad patted her on the shoulder, saying, "Don't cry. It's a good thing our daughter ended up in such good hands." I didn't know then that a marriage could look like a beautiful, shining storefront window, behind which hid thorns as sharp as razors. For the first 2 years, life was truly good. Carter worked a lot, but he always tried to make it home for dinner. We lived in a stunning 2-story loft in River North. The living room faced south and was always flooded with sunlight. I planted flowers on the balcony. Sometimes he helped me water them, though he always used too much water and literally drowned a few pots. Our biggest and only problem was the topic of children. During our first year of marriage, my mother-in-law started pushing the issue. At every Sunday pot roast dinner, she would ask, seemingly casually, "So, any news?" I would pretend I didn't understand and just stare at my plate. Carter would come to my defense. "Mom, what's the rush? We're young." But a year passed, then another, and I still wasn't pregnant. My own mother started to worry too. She discreetly slipped me the business card of a renowned endocrinologist, saying he was a top specialist and I should get checked out. I didn't go to him, because I knew perfectly well the problem wasn't with me. 6 months after our wedding, while cleaning out the bottom drawer of Carter's nightstand, I found lab results from a fertility clinic in the Loop. My husband's results. The diagnosis was unambiguous. Azoospermia, a complete absence of sperm. The chances of natural conception were 0. I didn't say a word to him. I put the papers back exactly where I found them, and then I went and got a comprehensive workup myself. The results confirmed that I was completely healthy. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep a wink. Carter spooned me from behind, his warm breath tickling my neck. I stared into the darkness, wondering how I should start the conversation. Why hadn't he told me? Did he not want to worry me? Or was he afraid I would leave him? I never asked. I didn't throw a fit. I just quietly went to that clinic. I asked for a copy of his results. As his wife, I had the right, and we had signed the authorization forms. I tucked it into the deepest zippered pocket of my purse. That piece of paper was like a seed buried in the earth. I didn't know what kind of fruit it would bear. Days passed, and on the surface, everything between Carter and me seemed normal, but I knew something had shifted. Sometimes, in his eyes, I caught glimpses of an emotion I couldn't decipher. Guilt, anxiety, or maybe something else entirely? I didn't ask. He didn't tell. We were like two brilliant actors on the same stage, performing our own separate monologues. The audience, his mother, my mom, our friends, thought they were watching a charming romantic comedy. No one knew what was hiding behind the curtain. The baby topic kept coming back like a boomerang. Once, my mother-in-law blurted out right at the dinner table, "Brooke, it's been over 2 years. If you're having health issues, go see a doctor. There's no point in waiting." I smiled and replied, "Please don't worry. Whatever is meant to be, will be." Out of the corner of my eye, I looked at Carter. He sat on the couch looking down, his fingers gripping the edge of his coffee mug so tightly his knuckles were white. That was the first time I thought that the most terrifying thing in a marriage isn't the fighting, but the silence. When one person knows the truth but chooses silence. When the other person lies but decides to keep playing the game, claiming he loves me while being unable to give me basic trust. I thought that was the worst-case scenario, a childless marriage of two people, each carrying their own secrets, keeping up the facade of a perfect life for the rest of the world until death do us part. I was wrong. The appearance of this young woman was like a hammer blow that shattered the glass house I had been carefully building for 3 years. When the doorbell rang, I was alone. Carter had gone on a business trip to New York. He supposedly had to finalize a major project and wasn't due back for 2 days. I was wearing a pair of old sweatpants, my hair casually clipped up, zero makeup on my face. The bell had rung 3 times. Quick, assertive. I set down my watering can and walked through the living room. As soon as I opened the door, a wave of heat from the hallway hit me, mixed with the overly intense scent of jasmine perfume. My eyes clouded over, and I needed a moment to get a good look at the person standing on my threshold. A young woman, maybe 24 or 25, dressed in a light pink maternity dress. Her hair was dyed a trendy greenish-blonde shade, styled in thick waves cascading over her shoulders. She had a petite face, a pointed chin, and lips painted with coral lipstick. It was obvious she had prepared meticulously, but the most eye-catching thing was her belly huge, stretching the fabric of the dress to its absolute limits. She had to be at least 6 or 7 months along. She stood in the doorway, her chin tilted up slightly. Her eyes held a mix of emotions: provocation, nervousness, and even a hint of fear. "You're Brooke?" she asked in a surprisingly melodic voice. "Yes. And you?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her belly. She slowly ran her hand over it in a gesture that was simultaneously a declaration and a show of strength. Only then did she look me straight in the eye. "My name is Riley. I'm pregnant with Carter." She didn't raise her voice, yet those words hit me like a full-force slap to the face. I froze. Not because the news shocked me, but because of its absolute absurdity. Carter's child? A man whose semen was completely sterile? How on earth did you get pregnant by him? I leaned against the doorframe and just looked at her. She had sharp, dark brown eyes that reflected my face. I must have been very pale because the corners of her mouth lifted in satisfaction. She clearly enjoyed my reaction. "You're pregnant with his child?" I repeated slowly. She pushed her belly out even further. "We've been together for over a year. He said he was going to divorce you anyway. It's only a matter of time. But my baby can't wait. I'm due soon. I won't allow the father to be absent on the day his child is born." She said it with such confidence, in such a dramatic way, that tears naturally welled up in her eyes. If I hadn't known the truth, I probably would have believed her. "So you came here?" I paused. "So I would voluntarily step aside for you? I didn't come to cause problems." She shook her head, and her tone suddenly softened. She sounded like an understanding younger sister reasonably explaining something to an older one. "Brooke, I know you're a good woman, but the problems between you and Carter didn't start yesterday, did they? You've been married for 3 years and you have no children. That's proof that something isn't right between you two. He only loves me. Let it go. It'll be better for everyone." How beautifully she phrased it. The most cruel words dressed up in the gentlest tone. As if everything I ever had was just an old debt that could be settled at a notary's office. As if marriage was a simple business contract. If someone offers a higher price, you just break it. My hand was still in the pocket of my purse on the console. My fingers brushed my phone and that carefully folded document. Does Carter know you're here? I asked. Hesitation flashed in her eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. He knows. We talked about it, and he told me to come alone. He's busy. Besides, we figured us women could settle this between ourselves much faster. It sounded so casual, as if she had come to discuss a noise complaint about loud music in the building, rather than breaking up a marriage. I studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. Come in. Have a seat. I stepped back to let her pass. It's hot out in the hall. You shouldn't be standing in your condition. Riley evidently didn't expect such politeness. She blinked, eyeing me suspiciously, as if wondering if I was setting a trap. Eventually, she walked in, squeezing past me with that massive belly, leaving a cloud of sweet, heavy perfume in her wake. I closed the door and followed her into the living room. She stood in the middle, looking around. Carter and I had picked out every single item in this house together. The light gray sofa, the oak coffee table. On the wall hung a hand-woven rug we bought in Asheville during our honeymoon in the mountains. Sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the space bright and cozy. Riley's gaze lingered on these things for a moment before quickly darting away. She chose a single armchair. She sat down carefully, adjusting her belly, then looked at me. "You're really not mad?" she asked, a note of uncertainty in her voice. I sat on the sofa opposite her, tucking my legs under me casually, as if I were chatting with a girlfriend. The buzzing of insects outside seemed to grow louder, creating an absurd soundtrack for our confrontation. Whether I'm mad is my business. First, explain everything to me. What exactly is going on between you two? Riley took a deep breath and began her story. They met a year and a half ago on a project. She was an assistant for a real estate developer. Carter took great care of her, explained the complexities of the blueprints, and over time, they started an affair. She spoke with intense detail, like she was reciting a memorized script. From their first dinner in West Loop to their last date by the Riverwalk. She said Carter was unimaginably happy with her, that he never mentioned me when he was with her, that his marriage to me was just a habit, but with her, it was true love. After every sentence, she paused, gauging my reaction. I didn't interrupt. I listened with the patience of a therapist. Toward the end, her voice dropped. Her eyes glazed over with tears again. Brooke, I know what I did was wrong, but you can't control love. My child can't grow up without a father. Have some pity on this innocent creature. Let us go. A single tear rolled down her cheek, dropping onto the pink fabric of her dress. I looked at her and felt something strange. It wasn't pity, it wasn't anger, and it certainly wasn't jealousy. I felt how utterly absurd and grotesque this all was. She acted with such commitment, so realistically, as if it were all true. As if my husband had actually gotten her pregnant, as if I should now burst into tears, sign divorce papers, and hand my life over to her. But none of it was true. From the very beginning, I pulled my phone out of my pocket, unlocked the screen, and opened the voice recorder app. I didn't hide it. When she saw me press the red record button, she paled for a second, but quickly returned to her pose. I understand everything you've said, I stated calmly. I just have one question. What? Are you absolutely certain that Carter is the father of this child? Her pupils contracted sharply, the color completely drained from her face. What? What do you mean? I mean this. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out the neatly folded paper. I unfolded it and slid it across the table toward her. Carter suffers from a certain condition. These are his lab results from a prominent fertility clinic in the Loop from 3 years ago. It says right here very clearly, azoospermia, absence of sperm in semen, chances of natural conception, 0. I pronounced every word slowly, like a teacher explaining a simple math problem to a student. Riley's face took on the color of the paper she was staring at. She glared at the diagnosis, her eyes frantically scanning the lines of text. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her hands gripped the armrests of the chair so tightly her knuckles looked carved from porcelain. Her massive belly rose and fell in a rapid rhythm, resembling a ticking bomb. You're lying, her voice trembled. I have no reason to lie. I tossed the document onto the coffee table. See for yourself. It has the official clinic stamp, a signature, And the doctor's medical license number. You can verify it. It's all real. Riley didn't touch the paper. She stared at it as if it might burst into flames at any moment. Her breathing grew shallower. The bright lipstick on her mouth now looked ghastly, like a bloody wound on a chalk-white face. Suddenly, she sprang up from the chair. She did it so violently she lost her balance and almost fell. Her skin broke out in a cold sweat. In her eyes, where just a moment ago tears of pleading love had shone, there was now pure, animalistic terror. It wasn't guilt or shame. It was the primal fear of prey that has just caught the scent of a predator. She didn't even look at me. She turned and bolted for the door. Step 2. Step 3. She walked faster and faster, stumbling over her own feet like a drunkard, fleeing from something terrifying. I stood up slowly and walked after her at an unhurried pace. She grabbed the handle. The wave of heat hit again from the hallway. She already had 1 foot over the threshold when I stepped right behind her. I reached out my arm and firmly, but without grabbing her, planted my hand on the doorframe just above her shoulder, cutting off her escape route. "Wait," I said. She turned her head, terror in her eyes. She saw my reflection in them, my face, which was hard for even me to recognize, because the expression it wore was terrifyingly calm, with a barely noticeable smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Riley." My voice was hushed but crystal clear. "Who is the father of this child? I think it's best we head straight to the police precinct right now and clear up this attempt at extortion." Her face went completely rigid, resembling a white mask. She dug her fingernails into the wooden doorframe. The insects outside went silent for a moment, and the entire building plunged into absolute, dead silence. In that silence, I only heard my own heartbeat, steady, strong, like a ticking clock. Standing in the doorway, Riley shook like a leaf. Her knees knocked together with a faint clicking sound. Her teeth chattered. That huge belly trembled right along with her, and the life inside her must have sensed its mother's fear, because it suddenly began moving restlessly. I could see the battle raging in her eyes. She was frantically calculating her losses, trying to find a way out, but she was too slow. From the moment she pressed my doorbell, she had lost her advantage in this game. "You won't let me go to the police with this, will you?" I pulled my arm back, opening her path. "You can go. I'm not stopping you. But the moment you walk out of here, things will take a very serious legal and medical turn." She froze. She couldn't leave, but returning to the living room terrified her just as much. Her gaze wandered from the elevator at the end of the hall, to the phone in my hand, to the empty, bright living room. Finally, her eyes landed on my face. "What do you want from me?" She finally choked out. Her voice was raspy, completely different from before. "I don't want anything." I slipped my phone back into my pocket. "You're the one who came here because you want something. You want my husband, right? You wouldn't have come here without knowing exactly who got you pregnant, demanding that I hand my husband over to you. That would be marriage fraud, which is prosecuted very aggressively by the law." I intentionally emphasized the word fraud. She flinched as if she'd been punched in the stomach. "I'm not defrauding anyone!" she suddenly shrieked, her voice turning shrill. "Carter himself." She bit her tongue, swallowing the rest of the sentence. We stared at each other. The air between us grew heavy and thick. The motion sensor light in the hallway clicked off, leaving us in the dimness. The long shadows cast by the sun from the window at the end of the hall tangled on the floor like a macabre knot. "Carter himself, what?" I prodded her. "He himself told you that you could get pregnant by him? He told you he wasn't sterile? Or did he come up with the idea for you to come here today?" I spoke calmly, but every word pierced her like a needle. She fell silent, nervously biting her lower lip. The elevator at the end of the hall dinged. Someone was coming up to our floor. Riley flinched, as if waking from a trance, and instinctively stepped back into my entryway. I pushed the door shut, cutting us off from the prying eyes of neighbors. "Let's go inside," I said, walking toward the living room. "Let's talk normally. If you don't tell me the truth today, this is not going to end well." Riley hesitated for a few seconds before her shoulders slumped, and she followed me. Her steps were heavy. She sat back down in the same armchair. But this time she didn't proudly push her belly forward. She curled into a ball, wrapping her arms around herself like a cornered animal. I sat opposite her, placing my phone on the table face up. The recording light was still on. I crossed my hands in my lap and waited. A lot of time passed. It was so quiet I thought she wouldn't say another word. I met Carter a year and a half ago, she finally began. Very quietly. I had just graduated from college. I took an internship with a developer. He was the lead external architect on our project. He was so handsome, elegant, and very sweet to me. Her tone lost its rehearsed drama. She was starting to tell the truth. He'd bring me my Starbucks order in the morning. He remembered what kind of milk I drank. He remembered I hate cilantro. He'd pick me up in his car when it rained, and I had to work late. He'd order me food when the boss yelled at me. Her voice started to break. I was fresh out of school. I didn't know how the world worked. Someone like that. I thought he really loved me. He said his marriage was just on paper, that a divorce was coming anyway. He asked me to wait, so I waited a year and a half. Did he show you the divorce papers? I asked. Or take you to his lawyer? She laughed bitterly and shook her head. And did he tell you why we didn't have children? She looked up at me. Her eyes were bloodshot. He said the problem was with you, that you had a medical issue and couldn't have kids. He said he didn't want to divorce you over it right now because it would break you. He told me to wait until you were in a better place mentally, and then he would talk to you. I snorted with laughter. It wasn't a laugh full of mockery or malice. It was just pure, genuine amusement. The situation was so colossally absurd, it was comical. A man who is reproductively useless knowingly lies to his mistress, telling her that his wife is the barren one. And the mistress believes him, and what's more, gets pregnant by someone else, and then magnanimously comes to demand the wife step aside. A Russian nesting doll of lies, layer beneath layer, and empty inside. And from all of this, she had pieced together a somewhat believable little story. How many months along are you? I asked. 7. Does Carter know? She nodded. And what did he say? Her lips trembled. She forced the words out. He told me to come here, to talk to you. He told you to come alone. Yes, at 7 months pregnant, he sent you alone to face his wife. She stayed silent. That silence was the loudest answer. I leaned back against the couch and looked at the ceiling. The light fixture we had hung there was a joint purchase from some trendy design boutique in West Loop. Carter had said at the time, "Let's not skimp on our home. It's our oasis after all." Now I knew that for Carter, our home and our relationship never meant much at all. I only knew his tender side. I thought it was reserved just for me. Meanwhile, he put that tenderness on like a coat the moment he walked out the door. A coat that concealed absolutely nothing of value underneath. If you've been together for a year and a half, I analyzed aloud. Did he ever go to an ultrasound with you? Did he see your pregnancy medical file? She had tears in her eyes again. He came a few times, but claimed work was overwhelming him. He took my lab results to his place. He said they weren't safe in my rented room with my roommates. Not safe? From whom? I laughed again. The excuses were so pathetic that a person of average intelligence wouldn't have bought them. But she wanted to believe. She wanted so desperately to believe that this upper-class architect would marry her and lay the world at her feet. Naivety is often the worst advisor. Did you ever think about one thing? I stood up, poured a glass of water from a pitcher, and handed it to her. She took it hesitantly. About what? If Carter really planned to divorce me and build a life with you, why didn't he tell me himself? Was he afraid I'd throw a fit that I'd take half his assets in court? Or did he decide that sending a heavily pregnant woman as bait would serve him better in pre-divorce mediation? Her knuckles turned white around the glass, he said. He said you had an extremely difficult personality. That he was afraid you'd do something drastic. I spread my arms. Do I look like someone who is extremely difficult? She looked at me but didn't answer. Even if I were, my voice grew hard and cold. He sent a woman in her 3rd trimester to face someone he described as extremely difficult and unpredictable. Do you think that shows how much he cares about your safety and the babies? Those words were the final blow to her architecture of illusions. The glass tilted in her hand. Water spilled onto her pink dress, leaving a dark stain. She didn't wipe it away. She sat with her head bowed, and her shoulders began to shake. She cried silently. That quiet, desperate weeping of a young, deceived girl was more moving than the loudest wail. I watched her in silence. She was simply another victim of the same liar. She spent a year and a half with him, gave herself to him, believed him, risked humiliating herself by confronting a stranger. And where was he? On a business trip in New York. You never know who the man you married really is until you see how he plays both sides. I handed her a box of tissues. She tore a few out and rubbed the makeup off her face, turning into a tear-streaked, smudged little monster. "What are you going to do now?" she asked quietly, blinking her swollen eyes. "Me? Do you have a plan?" "I don't know." Her voice was filled with utter helplessness. "I thought you were really getting divorced, that we would get married. I trusted him. I love him." "Do you really love him?" My blunt tone surprised her. She looked down, stroked her belly, and was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe at first." Then it became a habit, and eventually, a need to get what I wanted. He made so many promises. I invested so much time into this. I couldn't just let it go. If I let it go, what would I be? What would be the point of this baby? The sunk cost fallacy, not love. People cling to toxic arrangements not because they love the person, but because they've already invested too much to walk away empty-handed. I evaluated her in my mind, a girl fresh out of college. She hooked a mature, wealthy man in her industry. She bought into a fairy tale. And when she got pregnant, because she obviously had to have been with someone else, maybe in a moment of anger or loneliness, the fairy tale began to crumble, and Carter masterfully capitalized on it. "If I told you that Carter never intended to divorce me, would you believe me?" I asked calmly. She lifted her tear-stained face. She froze. I didn't rush her. Facing the brutal truth hurts the most when you have to admit it to yourself. "Why do you say that?" she asked in a hoarse voice. Because right from the start, he knew the baby wasn't his. The blood drained from her face again. He had the diagnosis. He paid for it himself, picked it up himself. A man who knows perfectly well he can't father a child doesn't react with shock or accusations when his mistress says she's pregnant. Instead, he tells her, at 7 months pregnant, to go harass his wife for a divorce. Do you think that's normal behavior? Riley stared off into space. Her hands started trembling again. "Why did he do it?" she whispered, as if asking herself. Instead of answering, I pushed my phone toward her. "Call him right now." She looked at me, terrified. "Tell him you came to see me. Tell him I flew into a rage and want a divorce. Ask him what you should do next. You have a chance to find out who he really is." She stared at the phone like it was a hot coal. She hesitated for a long time, but eventually pulled out her own smartphone. She unlocked it. I saw the name Carter and a little red heart emoji. That icon stung my eyes. I instructed her to put it on speakerphone. She pressed her lips together and hit the green dial button. After 3 rings, I heard my husband's voice. He sounded gentle, with a hint of condescending irritation. "Riley, how did it go? Did she throw a fit?" Riley closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to control the shaking in her voice. She went crazy, started screaming, asking a million questions. "Typical!" Carter scoffed dismissively on the other end. "That's just how she is. She acts composed on the outside, but inside she's boiling. She's terrified of losing her status. Don't let her intimidate you." My hands balled into fists. Riley glanced at me. There was fear in her eyes, but also the clarity of waking from a dream. "What should I do now?" she asked weakly. "She's threatening to go to the police." A 2-second silence fell on the other end of the line. Carter's tone instantly iced over. "Why are you panicking? You haven't done anything illegal. You're pregnant. If she even touches you, she'll put herself in trouble." "But—" Riley struggled for air. "What if she proves this isn't your baby? Does it matter what she believes?" Carter snapped in irritation. "What matters is what the court and her family believe. 3 years of marriage and no kids. Everyone will assume she's the one with the problem, and that she's shamelessly clinging to her role as my wife, dragging me down." I sat on the couch, and suddenly I felt unimaginably cold. Despite the heat in the room, a shiver ran down my spine. This was Carter, the man who held an umbrella over me in a downpour, who rubbed my back when I had a fever, whispering, "Brooke, I want to spend my whole life with you." He knew all my weak spots and had meticulously prepared to stab a knife into them. Tears were streaming down Riley's face. "And what about the baby? What happens when it's born?" "Let it be born first, then we'll deal with it," he tossed off casually. "Right now, your job is to force her to concede. The condo is mine, but she contributed to the renovation costs. Plus, we have joint savings. If she files for divorce in a fit of emotion, I can keep most of the assets without a drawn-out court battle. Riley went stiff. So you sent me to her not for me or our baby, but to save money in your divorce settlement? Carter fell silent. He must have realized something had gone off script. Riley, what are you talking about? What's gotten into you? Carter, did you ever plan on marrying me? This time the silence lasted much longer. Finally, he let out a dry, cynical laugh. Are you out of your mind? You're asking me this right now? You're emotionally unstable because of those pregnancy hormones. I'm not going to argue with you. When this is all settled, you'll get what you need. What does that mean? What I need, Riley yelled. Riley, Carter barked, his voice turning ruthless. Don't forget who pulled you out of being a basic assistant. Who's paying the rent on your nicer apartment right now? Everything you have is because of me. Be obedient, and this will work out well for all of us. The last remnants of color vanished from Riley's face. She looked at her phone as if she were talking to a stranger, a monstrous human being. I reached out and hit the red end call button. Silence fell. Riley sat as stiff as a board. She wasn't even crying anymore. All that remained on her face was a hollow, heartbreaking numbness. I turned off the voice recorder and saved the file. Do you believe me now? I asked. She didn't speak. After a very long time, she buried her face in her hands and let out a muffled, animal-like groan. She wasn't crying out of helplessness or anger. It was the sound of a complete collapse of the world she had believed in. I didn't comfort her. This wasn't the time for pity. She was complicit in her own misery because she got greedy for someone else's husband. And the main culprit was on his way back from his business trip. Carter walked into the condo just after 9 p.m. The sound of the lock turning echoed through the quiet living room. I was sitting at the table, looking over some documents. 3 things lay on the tabletop: my copy of his diagnosis, my phone with the recording, and the printed bank transfers Riley had sent me before she left. Before she walked out, completely drained of energy, she forwarded me their entire text history, proof that he was paying her rent, and tickets from their weekend getaways. Right before leaving, she stood in the doorway and gave a small bow. I'm sorry, she said. I looked at her still massive belly and felt no relief or satisfaction. Just exhaustion. You're not just apologizing to me. You need to apologize to yourself, I replied. Before you go into labor, go see a lawyer and figure out what to do about the baby with the real father, whoever he is. Leave Carter to the attorneys. She nodded and walked to the elevator, hunched over, carrying the heavy baggage of a brutal life lesson. That was why, when Carter walked in, I was exceptionally calm. He was wearing a white dress shirt, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder. He looked tired. To any outsider, he was the embodiment of the perfect, hard-working husband. He saw me in the living room and flinched slightly. Oh, you're up late. He smiled weakly, taking off his shoes. I looked at him and remembered how, on our wedding day, he lifted my veil and the stars reflected in his eyes. Brooke, I'll never let anyone hurt a hair on your head, he had promised before the altar. Some people's vows are worth as much as last year's snow. I didn't answer. I slid his clinic record to the center of the table. Carter's eyes locked onto the paper. He froze in the entryway with one shoe half off. I knew he instantly recognized it. Sit down, I said. We need to talk. He looked at me, and his face slipped into a mask of arrogance. He let out a dry laugh. You've been digging through my things? I smiled too. It was incredible. Faced with ultimate exposure, his first instinct was to attack. No apologies, no shame. Attack. I found it 3 years ago, I answered. His mask cracked. So for 3 years, you knew. I knew you were sterile, and I knew there was absolutely nothing wrong with me. I didn't tell a soul. Not your mother, not my parents. I didn't make a public scene at the dinner table during the holidays when your mother demanded to know when I was giving her a grandchild. I gave you the chance to be honest, Carter. His Adam's apple bobbed aggressively. Brooke, let me explain. I held up my hand. Spare me. I've heard enough today. It's time for you to listen. I pressed play. His own voice filled the living room. Everyone will assume she's the one with the problem. The condo is mine, but she contributed to the renovation costs. Be obedient. Every word slammed into the walls of that expensive loft like a gavel sealing the death warrant of our marriage. Carter went pale, then green, and finally, a sickly gray. When the recording finished, he just stood there, staring at the floor. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. "Do you have anything else to add?" I asked icily. He slowly walked to the sofa and collapsed onto it, slumping as if the life had drained from his body. "Brooke, I admit, I made a mistake. But you don't know the hell I was going through. Try to understand what it means for a guy to hear he's a zero in that department, that he can't pass on his legacy. I watched my mother badger you. I felt guilty, and I couldn't do anything about it. My heart was breaking. I looked at him with pity. He was completely unmasked, and he was still playing the victim. And so you decided to project your humiliation onto me. You ordered a woman who ironically was carrying another man's baby to come here and publicly humiliate me, forcing me to waive my financial rights." He avoided my eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to escape. I felt suffocated in this marriage. Escape to a woman who claimed she was carrying your child, even though you knew it was medically impossible? Or were you hoping for a miracle like in the movies?" My sarcasm lashed him like a whip. "You didn't force her to get a paternity test. You just used her to fight me for this condo." Carter's head snapped up. "You don't have to be so vulgar." I looked at him and felt a wave of relief that it was over. I always thought the only thing between us was his shameful medical condition. In reality, what stood between us was his monstrous, calculated cruelty. "Carter," I said firmly, "I want a divorce, and I am filing for an at-fault divorce." He stiffened. He might have dreamed of ending the marriage himself, but on his own terms. My words hit him with massive force. "Brooke, regarding the assets, we'll split them by the book, but an at-fault divorce will destroy my reputation in the industry. Your recordings don't have to go to court. Let's settle this amicably. I'll give you what you want." "You're just being ruthless." I laughed. "I'm ruthless?" Sending your pregnant mistress to my front door was a real masterclass in tact and grace. He froze. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and rolled out the suitcase I had already packed. I only had clothes, books, and toiletries in it. Nothing that belonged to him. When he saw the suitcase, he panicked, jumped up, and grabbed my arm. "Brooke, don't leave. Let's talk. I promise I'll end this circus with Riley. We can start over." I looked at his hand on my arm. Once, his touch made me feel safe. Today, it disgusted me. I shoved his fingers off with a fury. "You still don't get it. The issue with Riley and her baby isn't even the most important part here." I looked him dead in the eye, enunciating every word. "The most important part is that I don't want you anymore, Carter. You disgust me." He stood paralyzed, his hands raised. I rolled my suitcase toward the door. "You're going to regret this, Brooke," he yelled at my back in sheer impotence. I stopped at the exit and looked over my shoulder. "My biggest mistake in life was the moment 3 years ago when I saw your diagnosis and decided to save your pride at the expense of my own." I walked out, slamming the door behind me. The moment the lock clicked, I heard the crash of breaking glass. He probably threw a vase at the floor, but it wasn't my problem anymore. I didn't go back to Geneva. I didn't want my parents to see me in that state. I booked a small, elegant room in a boutique hotel near the high school. When I lay down in bed, the leaves on the trees rustled outside my window under the streetlights. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Hundreds of texts from Carter. First apologies, then accusations, then begging for my love again. He explained that he cracked under the pressure, that he loved me. I blocked his number at 2:00 a.m., sending him only one final message. "You brought this on yourself." The next day, I took personal leave and met up with my college friend Jess, who was a sharp family lawyer in downtown Chicago. She listened to my story, her jaw practically on the floor. The absolute audacity of this guy. "It's a clinical case of narcissism and manipulation," she summarized briskly, prepping a file. "You have him dead to rights, Brooke. With these recordings, you'll get an at-fault divorce at the first hearing. We'll sue him for half of everything you put into that luxury loft. There is no room for mercy here. Treat it as a mere formality." Her words were like a bucket of ice water, very refreshing. Carter tried to get to me at school, but the security guard wouldn't let him in. Then he called my mother. That afternoon, my mom drove in from Geneva to my hotel. I was afraid she'd lecture me about saving face in front of the family. Instead, she hugged me tightly. "Honey, come home," she said, rubbing my back. "If you don't want to be with him, don't be. We will always have your back. There is nothing worse than keeping up appearances at the cost of your own health." I broke down then and cried in her arms for a long time. I had a support system. I wasn't fighting a losing battle. A month later, Carter agreed to sign all the documents on my terms. He was forced to quickly buy out my share of the condo in a settlement and accept a divorce, because he knew that an at-fault ruling would publicly destroy him in court. Riley also found herself a ruthless attorney. She used all their text messages in a civil suit, proving that, knowing he was sterile, he intentionally inflicted emotional distress and tricked her into incurring expenses. Rumors spread through the Chicago architecture scene, and 2 massive developer contracts slipped right through his fingers. No one wanted to do business with a compromised, emotionally unstable partner. On the day we signed the settlement at Jess's office, he looked tragic. He was thin, unshaven, and had lost all of his big city charm. He sat across from me, his pen hovering in the air. "Brooke, have we really thrown everything away?" I looked at him. I didn't feel hatred. I didn't feel sadness. I was looking at someone who was a complete stranger. "Sign," I replied shortly. His eyes reddened. He scribbled his signature. He closed that chapter of my life. After the divorce, I spent the summer in Geneva. Life moved slower there. In the mornings, I walked with my dad to the local farmer's market for fresh vegetables. My mom cooked homemade dinners every day. I rented an apartment in a new building in the suburbs outside Chicago. At the very bottom of a drawer, I locked away my divorce decree alongside a photocopy of Carter's diagnosis, a piece of paper that once weighed me down like a stone, and then saved my life. 2 months later, I got a message from an unknown number. Riley had given birth to a baby girl. She sent a picture of the newborn. In the text, she admitted she had tracked down the real father. It turned out to be a guy from a one-night stand after an office party. She filed for child support from him and cut all contact with Carter. At the end, she wrote, "Brooke, thank you for not letting me destroy my life that day." I texted back, "Take care of your baby, be smarter, focus on yourself, not on men." She replied with a smiling face and a heart emoji. A year later, the spring semester was starting. The magnolia trees in the high school courtyard were in full bloom. Kids ran down the halls, yelling from afar, "Morning, Miss Brooke!" Once again, I was just the English lit teacher. I wasn't anyone's forced, childless wife. I was Brooke, who taught Emily Dickinson and grew roses on her balcony. My new apartment was barely 600 square feet. There were no exclusive light fixtures from fancy West Loop boutiques, but I picked out and assembled all the furniture myself. I could see the sunrise from my window. I had brought my favorite rose cutting from Carter's balcony to my new place. I used to think it was withering because he overwatered it, but now, in early May, it sprouted vibrant green shoots. Smiling, I realized people are just like these plants. As long as they have healthy roots, they can grow anew. I heard that Carter's firm eventually went bankrupt, and he had to move somewhere on the East Coast to start over as a subcontractor for a larger firm. His mother called me once. She was silent on the phone for a long time. Finally, she sobbed, "Brooke, I'm so sorry for everything." I was blind. I told her I forgave her and hung up. I left it in the past, holding no grudges. 3 years after the divorce, on a June afternoon, I was walking out of the Northbridge Mall downtown. In the plaza, I bumped into Riley. I noticed her because she was holding the hand of a little girl, maybe 4 years old, with 2 pigtails. Riley had ditched the green hair. She had a modest bob, a simple white blouse, and jeans. She looked older, but her eyes shone with a calm stability. The little girl was devouring an artisanal vanilla bean gelato cone. Riley recognized me instantly and gave a small smile. "Brooke." The little girl tilted her head up and asked sweetly, "Mommy, who's that?" Riley crouched down and wiped the gelato off her daughter's face. "This is an old friend from the past, sweetie." "Hi, lady from the past," the little girl squeaked. I laughed genuinely, and my heart melted completely. "I have a good job in HR at a corporate office now," Riley said proudly, standing back up. "I'm tired, but we're making it work." "I never thanked you properly back then. I'm sorry for what I tried to do to you. And thank you. I told you leave it in the past, I replied with a warm smile. Learn, work, raise her right. You're on a good path. She nodded enthusiastically, tugging on the hand of her squirming daughter who was now demanding cotton candy. She turned and waved goodbye. The late afternoon sun illuminated their silhouettes, making them look beautiful and natural. That evening, in my 600 square foot apartment, my rosebush produced its first bloom. It was small and modest, but its petals unfurled with proud perfection. I wanted to cut it and put it in a vase for the living room table, but after a moment, I pulled my hand back from the pruning shears. Let it grow on the balcony. It didn't need to sit in a vase for someone else to appreciate its beauty. It bloomed for itself. That was enough. I stood by the railing, watching the streetlights flick on around the nearby intersection. My mind drifted back to that sweltering June afternoon in Chicago, when a pregnant girl walked into my old life and ordered me to hand over my husband. Back then, I thought she had pushed me off a cliff. But what felt like the end turned out to be a new beginning. Far away from a life trapped in a cage woven of fake smiles, I had found my peace, my own name, and mornings free of hypocrisy. A fulfilling life isn't just about having children or a decades-long marriage. True fulfillment is having the power to choose for yourself. I went back inside. I sat in my armchair to grade my senior's essays. Suddenly, a text from my mom popped up with a picture. My dad was sitting in the kitchen, slicing a massive watermelon. Are you coming over Sunday? We're making BBQ ribs and we bought your favorite watermelon from the farmer's market. I smiled and typed back. Of course. Setting my phone down, I looked out at the sky. A bright full moon was slowly rising over the rooftops. I brewed a mug of herbal tea and sat back out on the balcony, breathing in the crisp evening air mixed with the delicate scent of the blooming rose. I thought to myself that the rest of my life was going to be unequivocally good. Not because there was some new romance looming on the horizon, but because I had finally learned how to truly love myself.